He is a ghost who haunts the Resolute desk, a specter that walks the inaugural parade route. He is a persistent shadow that falls across the White House lawn. He is the man who tried to assassinate every U.S. president. Of course, this man is not a single person. He does not have one name, one face, or one motive. He is an idea, a recurring American nightmare that changes its form to fit the anxieties of the age. He is a composite of the dozens of individuals who have, throughout history, attempted to kill the most powerful person in the world. He is a political zealot, a delusional madman, a disgruntled office seeker, and a fame-hungry loner. To understand him is to understand a dark, violent, and unbroken thread that runs through the very heart of American history. This is his story. The date is January 30th, 1835. The president is Andrew Jackson, Old Hickory, a man known for his toughness and iron will. He is leaving a funeral service at the U.S. Capitol. A man emerges from the crowd. His name is Richard Lawrence, an unemployed house painter. Our story begins not with a bang, but with a click. 2 clicks, in fact. Lawrence raises a pistol and pulls the trigger at point-blank range. He was found not guilty by reason of insanity and spent the rest of his life in institutions. His name was John Wilkes Booth, one of the most famous actors of his generation. His motive was purely, venomously political. He saw Lincoln not as a man, but as a tyrant who had destroyed his version of America. His was a grand theatrical conspiracy, and his target was Abraham Lincoln. The date was April 14, 1865. The Civil War was just days from its end. Washington was celebrating. While his co-conspirators faltered, Booth, using his fame to gain easy access to Ford's Theater, carried out his part of the plan with cold precision. He pestered the White House relentlessly, convinced of his own brilliance and importance. When he was, inevitably, rejected and told never to return, his mind twisted. Garfield would linger for months before succumbing to infection from the unsterilized hands of his own doctors. Guiteau's crime was born of entitlement and narcissistic rage. He is the specter as the disgruntled man, the man who believes the world owes him something. Lawrence set the stage. He proved that the greatest threat to the president might not come from a foreign power. In his mind, it was Garfield who was ungrateful. Garfield who was destroying the Republican Party. So he bought a revolver. He doesn't want anything for himself. He wants to destroy the system itself. And he believes that by killing its leader, he can land a fatal blow. In 1981, John Hinckley Jr. shot President Ronald Reagan and 3 others. But Hinckley had no political grievance with Reagan. He didn't care about Reagan's policies. Hinckley's motive was a desperate, delusional obsession. He even chose one with a fancy ivory handle, because he believed it would look better in a museum. Exhibit after he became famous for his historic act. He had become fixated on her after seeing the film Taxi Driver, in which the protagonist plots to assassinate a presidential candidate. Hinckley believed that by committing a historic act of violence, he could elevate himself to Foster's level and win her love. He kills not for a cause, but for a promotion. They make angry phone calls, but they rarely act. They want attention. Hunters are quiet. They research, they plan, they stalk, they acquire weapons. They are the ones who follow through. The Secret Service's job is to find the hunter before the hunt begins. His name was Leon Czolgosz, and he murdered President William McKinley. Czolgosz was a quiet, unassuming former steelworker. Rifles, and even grenades. He has been stopped by a misfire, a brave bystander, or a Secret Service agent jumping into the line of fire. 4 times, he has succeeded. Dozens of other times, he has come terrifyingly close. He is a permanent, ever-evolving threat, and the ghost that will forever haunt the American presidency. President is not one person. He is an idea, a dark reflection of the nation's passions, politics, and pathologies. He is born of insanity, of political rage, of personal grievance, of radical ideology, and of a desperate hunger for fame. It was about fame, notoriety, and a desire to be seen. One was a follower of Charles Manson, the other a radicalized former FBI informant. This modern specter is born of cultural obsession and a desperate craving for attention. But he was also a fervent anarchist, a follower of thinkers like Emma Goldman. Thus always to tyrants. Here, our specter shows his second face. He saw McKinley not as a political opponent, but as the embodiment of a system that exploited the common man. His motive was pure, radical ideology. He stood in a receiving line at the Pan American Exposition in Buffalo, New York. He is not driven by delusion or grand ideology, but by simple, wounded pride. His name was Charles Guiteau. His target was President James A. When President McKinley reached out to shake his hand, Czolgosz fired 2 shots into his abdomen. His reasoning was chillingly simple. He said, "I killed the president because he was the enemy of the good people, the good working people. I am not sorry for my crime." Garfield in 1881, Guiteau was a failed lawyer, a failed theologian, and a persistent, annoying pest. He is the political zealot, the man so convinced of the righteousness of his cause that murder becomes a tool, a legitimate act of war in his own mind. But from the fractured mind of a single citizen in the crowd, click. The gunpowder cap fails to ignite. In that split second, the 67-year-old Jackson, far from recoiling, charges his would-be assassin with his cane. Lawrence, undeterred, drops the first pistol and draws a second, taking aim once more. Click, another misfire. The crowd, including Congressman Davy Crockett, finally pounces, subduing Lawrence as President Jackson is hurried away, furious but unharmed. An investigation later found both pistols were in perfect working order. But who was Richard Lawrence? He wasn't a political opponent. He was a man lost in delusion. He believed he was the rightful heir to the British throne and that President Jackson owed him a vast sum of money. He claimed that Jackson's opposition to the National Bank had ruined his business. He was the first face of our specter, the man unmoored from reality. He was driven not by policy, but by a warped personal fantasy that placed the president at the center of his imagined persecution. 30 years later, the specter returned, but this time he was not a madman. He was a man with a cause. Booth was not delusional. He was a fervent Confederate sympathizer, a white supremacist enraged by Lincoln's victory and his plans to grant voting rights to Black Americans. He planned not just to kill Lincoln, but to decapitate the entire Union government by assassinating Vice President Andrew Johnson and Secretary of State William Seward at the same time. He shot Lincoln in the back of the head, leaped from the presidential box to the stage below, and famously shouted, "Sic, semper tyrannis." The next face of the assassin is perhaps the most pathetic. He had written a single, unremarkable speech in support of Garfield's campaign and, on the basis of this minor act, believed he was owed a prestigious government post, specifically the consulship in Paris. He felt betrayed, humiliated, and profoundly disrespected. He stalked Garfield for weeks, finally shooting him in the back at a Washington, D.C. railroad station. This variant is not trying to save a nation or fulfill a fantasy. He is trying to soothe a wounded ego, to exact revenge on a symbolic father figure who he feels has personally wronged him. Just 2 decades later, in 1901, the man returned with a different philosophy. To him, all government was a tool of oppression, and the president was its ultimate symbol. His hand was wrapped in a handkerchief to conceal the pistol within. This is the specter as the true believer, the man who sees violence against the state not as murder, but as a righteous duty. The 20th century saw the specter evolve again. Its motives became more tangled, more personal, more pathetic. He wanted to impress the actress Jodie Foster, whom he had never met. This was a profound shift. The assassination attempt was no longer about changing the country. It was about changing the assassin's own pathetic life. This same unpredictability was seen just a few years earlier, when President Gerald Ford faced 2 separate assassination attempts in 17 days, both by women. Stopping this ever-changing man is the near-impossible task of the United States Secret Service. Today, their job is not just to be bodyguards. It is to hunt this ghost before he can even get close. They classify threats into howlers and hunters. Howlers make a lot of noise. They send threatening emails. The man who tried to assassinate every UTI, he has used pistols.